Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Berkshire Pension Boards. The first item on the agenda this morning is for an election of chair. So do I have a nomination for chair, please? You can. You can. Yeah. Yep. Is that seconded? Yep. If we have no further... Sorry, to everyone online, just so that if they didn't quite hear, because the microphone wasn't on there, Alan has nominated himself for chair. Nikki Craig has seconded that. So if we are all happy with that and there's no further nominations, Alan Cross will be elected chair for the next municipal year. So with that, we will take an election for vice chair. So do I have a nomination for vice chair from anyone? Alan, just press your mic on because it is live. It will be ready to go. Here we go.
My understanding is Arthur should be with us for this year. He's been for vice chair for the past few years, and unless anyone wishes to jump in, I'd suggest that continues. Is that okay with Arthur, first of all?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
And everyone else?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got a chair and a vice chair, so we can move to the introduction and apologies.
And Neil has just joined us online as well, just to note.
And sorry, Neil's just joined us.
Yes.
Okay, he's just not on the screen because the screen's only got 4 people. Good morning, Neil, and good morning, everyone else. Apologies for taking the time on those formalities, but we have some years forgotten to do them at this meeting, so it's good to get them done properly. Anyway, welcome to this meeting of the Berkshire Pension Board on Monday, the 21st of July, 2025. My name is Alan Cross, and I've just been elected chair of the board, and I will chair the meeting. The meeting is being held virtually via Zoom. So there's the officers and myself and Nikki Craig in the room here in Maidenhead, and it's streamed live to the public on YouTube. Can I remind everyone that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live, and acknowledge that after the meeting will continue to be available in the public domain. It's important that participants recognise that meeting remote requires a different approach than meeting in person. Firstly, it would be useful if board members could introduce themselves along with officers so that the public who may be watching or may watch later know who's in the meeting and the roles they're undertaking. So, as already stated, I'm Alan Cross, chair of the board. I'm a member representative. Nikki.
Good morning, Nikki Craig. I'm an employer representative.
Shall we go around the members of the board first? So, Jeff.
Jeff Ford, member representative.
Arthur.
Arthur Parker, employer representative.
Julian.
Julian Curzon, employer representative.
And Neil.
I'm Neil Bullough, member representative.
And do the officers want to introduce themselves?
Good morning, Jo Thiswood, Head of Pension Fund.
Good morning, Philip Boyton, Deputy Head of Pension Fund.
Good morning, Martin Griffiths, Pension Admin Manager for the fund.
Good morning, Barry Jones, Deputy Administration Manager for the fund.
Mikey, do you need to introduce yourself further?
Just Mikey Lloyd, Democratic Service Officer and Clerk to the board.
Thank you very much. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite them to do so. For virtual participants, you can do this either by indicating on Zoom or raising your hand. We usually work that one out okay. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity, though I think we probably all know each other well enough that that won't be necessary every time. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. All our participants should keep their microphones muted at times other than when invited to speak. Background noise can be distracting and will adversely affect other speakers and progress. If any individual attempts to disrupt, I'm able to use powers to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. We'll now move to the agenda items. We're all here, so we have no apologies to absence. We welcome Barry, the Deputy Pension Administration Manager, to his first meeting of the board. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Don't normally have any, should anything crop up during the course of the meeting, and we do touch on this on one of the items. We then have the minutes of the meeting that we had back in March. So we're just sorting out a bit of administration in terms of my name badge in the room. The minutes of the meeting in March were sort of circulated a while ago. They were presented to the committee in this state in a month or so ago. Has anybody subsequently noticed anything in the part 1 minutes that needs further adjustment, or are we happy that I sign these as a correct record? I'm seeing sufficient nods and thumbs up to suggest that that will be fine to do, which I'll do in a moment. And we've also got the draft minutes of the pension fund committee for, I think, for noting and picking up the only observation I sort of had reading these through again is there was a full response due to go to the lady from the East Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Has that subsequently happened?
I haven't done that yet. I will do that by the close of play this week.
Thanks, Joe. And can that just be circulated or a link to where it can be seen? I presume these responses are made public for everybody to see what's been asked and what's been said. That's great. Think that moves us fairly sharply onto the administration reports. And I can see Martin eager to press his button to introduce it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. May I start off by apologising that some of the tables and graphs in this were slightly got skew-whiffed when we actually converted it to a PDF, but hopefully you'll be able to see on the chart the information we're actually trying to portray for you, and we'll make sure that doesn't happen for future meetings. Just to introduce this, in introducing this report to committee, what we're actually trying to do on this occasion was actually cover certain aspects that were not normally covered in the administration report for the pension committee, because we think these are things that are important for the board going forward in their role of overseeing the work of the administration team. So there is some slightly different contents to what you would have had previously. If I can now go to Appendix A to start with, and just cover generally the points that we're actually going to pick up here. We have our normal scheme membership graph, which is one that we would normally send to the pension committee. Then we go on to an area which covers key performance indicators, and it's the tables within, or graphs within this section that I apologise are slightly skew-whiffed. We have made a few notes for you within that section about where we are with regard to workloads in the pension team, the sort of backlogs that we're actually dealing with, and why we have a number of backlogs that we're actually carrying, some of them partly to do with the valuation and the fact that we do have to chase up certain records from employers in order to get our data up to date before it goes off to the scheme actuary. Our year-end processes, as you will see there, indicated that we had quite a large number of records that needed to be processed, and this backlog had to be dealt with in order for us to provide clean data to Barnett Waddingham, our actuary, for the valuation. We had about, as it said there, 300 leavers forms that we had to get in from our employers, which was in addition to what we normally process. These were leavers that the fund hadn't been informed about at the time that the members had left, and therefore we just needed to chase those up in order to get those processed. We particularly need to get those processed in order to produce the annual benefit statements that need to be run correctly in August. Obviously, the pensions regulator is very keen that the information we provide in those statements is accurate and up to date. So the graphs you've got there, which cover starters, deaths, refunds, and retirements, for which I apologise are slightly skew with, but you will be able to see from the bar charts where we actually are. The vast majority of them, we are above our 95 target. So they're quite good. I think the deaths was just slightly lower, but we only just missed it on this occasion. But obviously, it's something we're obviously working to maintain above the 95 level. We have got a note there under the KPIs that there is actually some work being done in our annual report going forward to actually look at more KPIs, because we're going to have to produce those in line with the requirement of the Scheme Advisory Board, which means in addition potentially to the 4 that we've got in here, we may look to be able to provide you with more information covering the work that we actually do. We have had some additional resource provided to the pension team. We have had a contractor which we've been using in order to provide us with an additional resource. That work is coming to the end of August. And we have another casual member of the member staff which has started, who's also helping us out, and they have helped reduce the workload of our team members. However, there is still a considerable amount of work for the fund to do. It is still a bit of an issue with regards to the team in recruitment, but this isn't just our problem in Berkshire, it's a problem nationally. And we still experience a considerable amount of difficulty actually appointing people who've got knowledge of the LGPS. Without going through every item on here, I'll just cover just the main headings. There's a new section there on training and qualifications, what our team have been doing, and the training our employers have received. There's an area there on communications, which breaks down the number of calls we receive in an average week, the number of emails we receive, the number of pension online activation keys we receive, and the number of surgeries and presentations that we do in a particular month. There's also a breakdown there in those graphs about the member self-service facility and how many people are actually interacting and using that facility. And there you've got a breakdown of those ages as well. So obviously, vast majority falling particularly there within the 50 to 60 age group, which is probably when people become more interested in their pensions, which is why we probably have a greater number of people actually wanting to use that facility. We have a note there under those graphs about the new platform called Engage, which I think we brought to your attention before, something that our technical team are working on installing, and that is something that will be launched later in the year. And it's just an improved version of the member self-service that we offer at the moment. We then have an item covering our employers, which covers the submissions that we've had. This actually just has April and May in it. They haven't been finalised actually for June as yet. As you can see there, we have, when we say received within specification, the fund has a particular date by which it expects to receive its iConnect files. Although we have a couple of funds there, a couple of employers there, sorry, who haven't met the 100%, it is important to understand they have their own issues. We've worked with RBWM. That's an issue that they currently experience with their payroll supplier. Nothing to do with the staff within RBWM payroll. It's something that they're working on to deal with. And we are also working with Slough to try and deal with the problems that they're encountering. But the important thing to know, and the board to know, is this has no effect on the payment of anybody's pension benefits, because what we do is we receive a written notification on a form for pension notification, so it doesn't come through on iConnect submission. So the fact that we haven't had it within a particular date doesn't affect the payment of anybody's benefits from the fund. We've also gone on to summarise details of iConnect data received on time, monthly contributions received on time, and the monthly deficit lump sum payments that we received on time. Thought the board may be interested to know how timely we get the information and payments over from our employers. Section 1.6 looks at compliments and complaints. We wanted to bring it to the attention of the board that we have no outstanding IDRP cases. This is the formal method that an employee can approach the fund in order to make a complaint about something their employer has done or the fund has done. It's a two-stage process. It's dealt with by an appeals officer at the first stage and then by the fund at the second stage. The fund always tries to resolve complaints before it gets to this stage and going through this process. It's the same process that's applied to all local government funds across the country. We wanted to let you know that we have had a query from the pension ombudsman relating to a member who transferred their benefits to an overseas arrangement. And as the fund was unable on this particular case to demonstrate that we sent the correct forms covering the risks of such a transfer that were issued to by the fund, we decided the best option was to actually reinstate the members' benefits in full, giving them a deferred pension based on up to the point when they transferred their benefits out. Since the point that time occurred, it's been much tighter ways that we actually deal with our transfers, particularly those overseas. We have to meet certain criteria. There is a green, amber, red flag system that we have to follow. And we do make sure that's obviously covered by all the team and they follow it carefully. We also have a selection of compliments that the team have received over the last quarter, which is always nice to have a compliment. You presume people appreciate what you do, but it's nice when someone puts it in writing. And we do always go back and thank them for the compliment that they've sent into the team. Section 1.7 talks about breaches in the law, but I'm going to leave that for Philip to pick up in his paper because it's an area that he is actually covering. All I really wanted to point out to the board is that we have had no breaches that have taken place in the last quarter. And that's something I think is important to report back to you on a quarterly basis now going forward. The valuation, we are still actually working on the valuation. I know it says quite clearly within that piece there that we do normally want to get the information sent off to the actuary by the 30th of June. We'd had a couple of areas that had to be revisited and other reports checked because of McLeod, because obviously this is the first year that we're actually having McLeod that's going off in the valuation data, but we are hoping that the data will be sent off Wednesday of this week. And we have spoken to the actuary about it and they are aware of that. We cover two separate projects at the bottom there, McLeod and dashboards, but I wondered if there were any questions on, before I start on those, on any of those other areas of the report from any member of the board.
Thanks, Martin. Jeff's indicating I'm going to take everybody else's questions and then I have a few that if they aren't covered, we'll come to them. Jeff.
Yeah, on page 38, which is a very interesting graph showing you the communication, you quote that you've got over 90s, you've got 9,305 of them, which sort of stands out a bit like a sore thumb, as you would expect that graph to be reducing. Is that something to do with the frozen refunds issue?
We have, yes, that does look odd compared to the others because it looks such a large percentage not interacting, but I suppose we would expect these are members or retired members of the pension scheme who are over the age of 90. Most of them, they will all be retired. We won't have any workers in that time. So obviously the member self-service platform doesn't actually offer an awful lot of facility for the overnight for our retired members. And that's why we'd expect the vast majority of them potentially not to be interacting with it.
So just to confirm, you actually have 9,000, over 9,000 over 90s in our pension fund?
They won't, there will be some status, as you said, some other statuses within those. Which potentially we haven't been able to communicate with or contact for some reason. So they're being left sort of in a holding state at the moment. And once again, we wouldn't actually expect them to be using the service either because we're struggling to actually engage with them
No, I'm not expecting them to be engaging with you. I would have, I'm just amazed we've got 9,000, over 9,000
Can I jump in?
90s.
Martin, can I just jump in and say, are the people we're uncertain of the age of and things like that?
Yes, I mean, we would expect that we haven't got over that percentage of people actually over the age of 90. So I think what that's picking up, as Jeff said before, certain categories of members which are actually loosely recorded in our system. So we'll try and make sure that we run another report for that to ensure that we are accurately showing it for you.
Forgive me for asking the question, through Chair. You say loosely reported. I'm a bit nervous with that word loosely reported. I thought, you know, having your date of birth was pretty fundamental to your pension.
Yeah, I'll answer it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your questions. So we have 9,305 there suggesting over 90. That will be a makeup of a variety of different statuses, but predominantly status 5, so in payment members along with dependent members. Of course, discussions we've had previously around historical status 9 records, those will undoubtedly be included in there as well, because we just have not been able to engage with them. And that's a process that they will fall into when we start looking again at address tracing and perhaps the pensions dashboards programme going live in the next 12 to 18 months will lend support to the pension fund with as well.
Bill, can I just seek further clarification? So if somebody's a survivor benefits, you presumably don't necessarily know the age of the survivor?
So for every single scheme member, whether a first life or second life survivor, we hold a date of birth. So we will easily be able to identify the ages of those surviving pensions. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm now confused. Obviously, I think for reasons we've rehearsed, you probably hold the scheme members' date of birth, but I can't see we would necessarily collect these. You know, in crude and simple terms, if Mr. and Mrs. Jones, for simplicity, were the partner and Mr. Jones had the pension originally, he's died, she's entitled to the survivor benefits. I don't see, unless you ask when she becomes entitled to those benefits, you necessarily have her date of birth. And
where a scheme member passes away, and there is a surviving partner's pension payable, we will request from the surviving partner their date of birth and their verification of their date of birth through a birth certificate.
So that is collected to the point they start receiving.
Yes.
But it feels like there's a lot of other people in this category, as well as some people who literally, I mean, presumably there's a few over 100, but let's be real, there are not 2.5 times the number over 90, 100 plus than over 80 to 90 or whatever the category below that was.
Through the reporting available to us in the software, we will be able to understand better the makeup of the total that's shown. But primarily, it will be made up of in-payment scheme members and surviving partners.
Yeah. Okay. But it needs looking at further, is I think what you're telling us.
Yes, so we would be able to drill down into what that number is made up of as individuals, scheme members. Yeah.
Others? Okay. Can I just go back? There's a comment about 300 leavers. Are those not come through, information not come through with iConnect then? Is that just trying to understand the process of it?
That's correct, Chair. But that's across our 300 or so employers in the scheme. So I mean, it's no particular employer that has not sent information through to us. But what we've done is obviously we've run reports and found out that we don't have information on them. So we just need to request that information so we can carry out year-end activities.
But just to rehearse that, so something like 90% of people are on iConnect or going that way. But that 300 will come from the 10% who are not.
A good percentage of them will come from that 10%, yes.
Yes, okay.
There could be the odd one that's come from the
Yeah,
ICANN for some reason, but the majority would come from the
A handful in
element that
300, I
aren't
don't think we're
yet-
bothered
aren't
about.
sending
but
us
yes.
through an ICANN
Yes,
excellence.
but I think what that demonstrates is, you know, if we only had 10% on iConnect, presumably that would be somewhere near 3,000.
Yes, a lot worse if we had less
which
people
would not
actually
be good
using the
news.
facility. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. The comment towards the bottom of page 6 about things that Prue is doing. What I wanted to understand a little better was what was going to be the impact either on the fund or individuals of them rejecting stuff that wasn't quite right. I mean, obviously, when people want to set up, change or do things with AVCs, that's usually quite important to them. And obviously it's important that they're helped to get it right, ideally first time, so that they don't hit the buffers sort of thing. But
yes,
what's actually going on there?
Yes, Chair. At the moment, what is happening is that when an employer sends through a submission to Prue about its AVC members, the Prue, if they find that there's an error or an issue with them, they are correcting them at their end rather than going back to the employers. But that is something they have decided that isn't an approach they're going to take going forward. So what they're trying to do is educate employers about how to complete their forms to ensure they're right at the first step.
Right.
I don't believe we have a major issue here in Berkshire with regards to them, but this is an area that's been offered, or training that's been offered to all the pension funds that use Prue as their AVC provider. So it's not that Berkshire has a particular issue with this, but we've obviously just thought it was worthwhile encouraging our employers to attend the training so that they knew what Prue were actually looking for.
And are we going to get information from the Prue about whether there've been many Berkshire cases that they've kicked back once they start doing this?
Chair, a regular, once a quarter, we have a meeting with our client manager there, and they provide us some data about what's happening with regard to the Berkshire Fund.
Okay, so I mean, if it's at insignificantly low levels, fair enough. If it becomes significant, obviously, let's have a conversation about it.
That's it. I'd be certainly happy to report back to the board if we have any issues with regard to potential and our employers submitting data to them.
Yeah, it struck me just on the issue you've had that not all the data was available for the full quarter. We possibly need to think about when we time these meetings, so ideally it can be available even if it has to be circulated, you know, the Friday before the meeting sort of thing.
Yes, Chair, I did actually contact to try and get that information for you this morning, but unfortunately it wasn't available. But we can certainly, we'll go back a month. The next time we actually come back to you, we'll actually include June's in there. We'll give you some more information.
Do we know if the 6 larger employers have ticked the box this month, or have we still got the problems you've mentioned at Slough and RBWM?
Well, at the moment, we've asked for the information. I think there are currently a few issues, but we are working with those employers to resolve them. So I don't think it is anything to be over concerned about, because it's our deadline that we say we want the information by. It's not a statutory requirement. And as long as we get the forms through for retirements, we're not affecting anyone's benefits.
On the section about comms, the big circle graph, I was getting a bit confused or something, the table above it, users visiting the website, and this is during an average, so it's 14,000 during a month. So we've got 90,000 members in the fund. So we're saying 1 in 6, 7 of our members are visiting the fund every month. Are those unique visits?
They could be a whole range of visits. So they could be a member actually looking for information about when they can take their retirement. They could be a member going in to use the member self-service platform. There could be anything. It could just maybe to get contact details for the fund potentially in order to send in an email or make a telephone call.
Sure, but are they unique visits? Because it sounds extraordinarily high that 1 in 6 members of the fund are going to the website every. I mean, I have used it myself, but not that recently and that frequently.
It could be the same person.
Going.
It won't be 14,000.
It's not.
It could be the same person. You know, one person could be going on 10, 15 times if they're doing as Martin has suggested and checking contact details or going in and out to their personal statements, etc. So it won't be 14,000 individuals. It's 14,000 visits.
Clicking the button? Yeah, so you may want to go in and do a calculation based on this date, and then the next day you think, I'll do another one.
Times looking for particular bits of information. So, you know, it's not going to be that many people.
And do I recall it, our ability to measure unique visits is not as good as it once was?
No, thank you, Alan. I mean, this report as well covers the period of April when we have had a pensions increase. And what we have found previous years is high volume of traffic around a pension increase time because of all of the information we upload to the website. There has been a change in the council's web provider relatively recently. We can look to see whether information can be drawn as to what the top 10 most popular pages are, for example, for our members to visit, and whether they are unique or multiple visits. We can take that away as some work to look at.
I'm inclined to suggest it would be helpful to try and look at unique visits as well as visits, because in a sense, I understand Nikki's point that, you know, when you start looking at your pension, you do it over a few days and you end up logging in several times over the days, but, you know, and that's understandable if people are focused on pensions for a period in their life for whatever reason, but actually knowing how many different people are doing that is probably important. Joe's flagging.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair, to say this is the visit to the pension fund website, not necessarily just to the member self-service. So it could also be people looking at policies or processes or newsletters, etc., etc. I don't think it's possible to obtain information about in unique hits, but this is a new report to us. We're going to develop it as we go through, but we'll just present it to you.
Sorry, Chair, just to add to that point that Joe's just made, I would also say that if somebody clicks to say they're declining that their cookies can be logged, you wouldn't have their information anyway.
And do I understand some of this information you're not intending to take on to committee from the way things, or are you intending? I mean, obviously, it'll be refreshed, I presume, by the time we get to the committee cycle.
This is something that we're working on. We haven't quite worked this through yet. There are levels of information that are relevant. Some of this information that we're providing here will be required to be included in the annual report and accounts. So it may be that we take this forward. Going forward, what I'm hoping is that we will have a proper quarter's worth of data in these meetings. It may be that we, as you say, table a final update of this report after the publication date, but making sure that we've got the right information. We haven't yet thought in great detail about whether this information is just lifted and shifted straight into a committee report, or whether we tailor some of the information that's provided. But it's a developing area. And we're just trying to make sure that we get the right information to the right people at the right time.
Yeah, okay. And just going back to the first section about workloads, is the position you've experienced this year typical for sort of the year end, and it's become more significant this year because it's actuarial valuation year? And or is this sort of something we now we've looked at it, we've realised there's some stuff to do that we hadn't really I mean, where are we in this space?
I mean, valuation makes it more of an issue for us, but obviously at every year end we are looking to make sure that all our records are up to date, because the annual benefit statements, when they go in August, must reflect correct data. So obviously if we're not holding that, then we're not being able to produce an accurate set of figures of a member's benefits at the 31st of March or at normal pension age. So I'm hoping that obviously we'll have the resource as we have currently in order to meet that, and hope we still always have levers, I'm sure, that we're not aware of, and for those non-iConnect users that we'll have to deal with. But obviously we're working on the resource to try and make sure that we can cover that with the team.
Yeah, and the multiple records issue is sort of presumably one in a similar space, that there's always some of those. And
yes, that's correct.
And people have rights, and one of the issues is, have they been made aware of their rights? And whilst we can't provide them advice, perhaps told the impact of decisions they may or may not wish to make.
That's correct. I would like to feed back to the board that the two people that we brought in to assist the team over a period of time have been working permanently, really, on dealing with the records where there were multiple records in order to try and get those right. So they've been taking that work away from the day-to-day work of our team members, and we have a very low number of those now left to process. So they have brought us into a very good situation.
Does anyone have any other questions and everything before the special projects section, which I think Martin wanted to introduce separately? Shall we move on to that then, Martin?
Thank you, Chair. As Joe said, with regards to this report, just before I go into the special project section, this is our first stab at providing you something slightly different to what we provided in committee, but we are happy to provide you the information that you require. You know, if there's something that you don't feel you want to see, or there's something you do want to see, then obviously Joe, Philip, or myself, or Alan, please get to any of us, and we'll try and include that going forward. Okay, as far as the special projects are concerned, we have two listed here in this paper. You will have been aware of both these particular projects as we've spoken about them on a number of occasions. The first one is the McLeod project. There is a separate paper that accompanies this, Appendix 2, which gives you a breakdown of how we're actually dealing with that at the moment. But the team are continuing to work through this age discrimination remedy, but it has created a lot of additional work on top of business as usual. And we are trying our very best to ensure that it is delivered in a timely manner. We have to ensure that our annual benefit statements go out at the end of August. At the time of writing this report, we thought we'd only be able to deliver the deferred member statements showing a breakdown of the underpin amount, but we are now in a position to confirm to the board we'll be able to do the same for our active members as well. So what they will see on their statements is the value of their benefits as at the 31st of March and their benefits at normal retirement date, but they'll also be able to see of the value of those benefits, how much of that is represented by the underpin amount. And this is the uplift on benefits that a member would have received had they remained in a final salary structure rather than moving to the care benefits. So we will be reflecting all that information in our annual benefit statements when they go out. The deferred statements will be going out next week or will be published next week. And those people who've requested a paper statement, they will be sent out shortly. And we will ensure that all the active statements are delivered, all the paper ones and those published to the member self-service portal before the 31st of August, which is when the regulator says we need to get the information out. We went to pension committee, when I know the chair attended that pension committee, to ask for permission with regards to the areas of the McLeod remedy that we wouldn't be able to deliver by the 31st of August this year. And we went to the committee to ask for what we call a determination on the McLeod implementation. And we asked, as most funds have around the country, for an extension beyond August this year to August 26. And that gives us the opportunity to tackle the other cases that we are not in a position to do at the moment. The main reason we can't deliver those is that there is not software available in place for us to deliver them. We can't run them through our system, or alternatively, the regulations are not in place nationally to allow us to do them. So in other words, there's certain regulations which govern, for example, providing the McLeod uplift to people who have a pension debit following a pension sharing order. A number of our transfers, we have issues with those, people who are over normal pension age. And all those are things that we have to get sorted out with the regulations before the software provider can then put things in place to run the calculations. So there won't be any funds in the country that will be in a position to have delivered this by the end of August 2025. We're very grateful that the committee did deliver us that permission to extend beyond that point. And we have put in our project plan, as you will actually see, which is attached in Appendix 2, the timelines that we're hoping to look at these cases. The one area which I'm sure you'll be particularly interested will be the rectification of the pensions or pensioners already receiving their pensions now, whereby there will be an uplift on the value of their benefits if they are actually covered by the McLeod remedy. We have already identified there is just over 100 cases, which as a percentage of our number of pensions in payment is very small. However, it is our aim to get these sorted out by the end of the year. What we will be doing is obviously working out what their pension will be going forward. We will work out what pension they've missed and any interest that needs to be applied to that underpayment that they've received. And our aim is to get those sorted out by December. And we think that's well within our abilities to do that. If we can get them done before that point, we will do. And we've already made a start by identifying them. And we're in the process now of working out how much each member is currently short as far as their pension benefits are concerned. The transfer area is a major piece of work for the pension team. We have made a number of transfers, and transfers have come into our fund, and we'll have to collect and check that this data is correct and is taken into account the McLeod remedy. And that is a piece of work that all pension funds will have to do to ensure that our data is correct. And we are waiting for some more guidance on that from the LGA. That's McLeod. I don't know if anyone wants to ask anything about McLeod before I go on to dashboard.
Shall we deal with McLeod and then
Of
go
course
to
we can.
dashboard?
I thought there may be some questions.
Dashboard might be a bit quicker to deal with, but questions on what Martin's just told us about, or what's it written in the report on that one, Jeff?
Actually, it was going back a stage. I was just interested to know whether we had any complaints about the change of the payment of pensions in December. You know that we have moved our pension from somewhere in the middle of the December to the 31st. And I just wondered, I was always worried that that might cause an issue. And I just wondered whether there was much feedback about the issue. I'm sorry, I'm going back.
Thanks, Jeff, for your question. We had no questions at all. No comments, no questions, no complaints. So everybody was comfortable. I think we may have had one person contact us for clarity. And I think the reason for that was that member is partially sighted. And we, due to resource constraints, we didn't send out one of our newsletters in Braille format. And that person didn't receive, obviously, the information that they, in an accessible format for them. But once we explained the situation, they were completely happy. So we had no comments, complaints, or anything at all.
But I mean, that's good. That's good to hear. Thanks, Joe. Just on McLeod, has anything sort of emerged about what's the typical circumstances in which somebody is generically getting this, or is it all? Are there lots of different circumstances? I've always been curious since this emerged. What particular circumstances does an individual have to be in to get a different pension under the old against the new?
Yeah, so obviously what we've been looking at is actually a comparison about what somebody got when we moved over from the final salary scheme in 14 to the care scheme, career average revalued earnings scheme. A lot of people were obviously concerned about that. There was protection in place at that point for certain members. However, this remedy is actually to give everybody that same protection. It was thought that very few members would actually receive any change to the value of their benefits. And we have found when we have run our programs through our system, there is only a relatively small number of people. If I can just give you an example on the pensioners, we've got some which are very, very small amounts. We're looking at a couple of pounds a year. And we've got some in the hundreds as well. So it does depend on what sort of service the member had and what sort of salary they were actually on. So we will obviously work with each case, but there isn't a set amount. We are in line with generally what all other LGPS funds are doing and offering as far as a benefit change.
I guess I'm probably more interested in, those that land up in the hundreds than those that end up being
Yes.
£2 a year, because, £2 a year is going to be neither here nor there to anyone, I would imagine, but clearly those in the hundreds for some people it may be very important.
Yes, I mean, obviously we will be looking, when we look to do the rectification on these pensioners' benefits, we will be looking at the larger ones first and going down. So in other words, we will look to deal with those where we have underpaid for a period of time, and we need to deal with those more rapidly. So we will look at it that way.
Good, thank you. Shall we move on to the dashboard?
Certainly, Chair, there isn't an awful lot to report on this. I just provide you a bit of an update about the pension dashboard, and obviously that it's there in order to deal with members who have lost pension benefits. We are working with our software provider in order to provide this data to members. So we have worked quite hard and we've had quite a lot of good progress on this. And we will be ready for the launch next year when it actually takes place.
Jeff?
Can you just remind me, do we have a fixed date for the launch?
There is a date in October 26, I believe, for the launch. But it is nothing's been set in stone. That's the date in the regulations, I think, that they're stating. There has been a lot of talk over recent months whereby certain very large public sector schemes have changed their administrators, which means they may not be ready to provide. It's not the local government scheme, by the way, but there are other large public sector schemes who've changed their administrators, and that was causing concern about whether it would be worth delivering it in October 26. When there will be potentially some large administrators that aren't able to provide the pension details. But I think at the moment they're hopeful that they will be there.
Okay, but that October 26 is currently a backstop date that it has to be done by, can be done earlier, or? We have got to get the information before that point uploaded, but people and individuals won't actually see them until October 26th. Okay, so we can load up, but an individual can't go and see until then. That's okay. So I'm not saying we are ready today, but if this afternoon we were ready, it could be loaded up today, sort of thing.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
We are looking to obviously get it up as quickly as we can, and we go through a process with our software providers to make sure it is there and it is ready at the right time.
I can see that if something like teachers' pensions had a change of administration, I don't know whether it is them, that could be problematic to them, because that they have, obviously, because they've got the whole teaching workforce of the country in their system. That would be quite a challenge if they're not ready.
Just to add to the point as well, if I may, in terms of readiness, in some respects, we have offered ourselves as a test site to the software provider, but also key to the pensions dashboards is good quality data, which we've confirmed we have had over a number of years now. So when we are in a go live position come October, members will have good quality data to review when they log in.
Thanks, Phil, and indeed that's been sort of the implicit sort of thing in the number of compliments and very few complaints that we get, that we have good information, so we by and large able to provide people with the right things, and usually can resolve any issues that are usually minor that do arise fairly quickly, and people are quite happy. And obviously I appreciate a number of people have contacted the pension fund at a fairly key moment in their lives when perhaps they've, something's changed and they've decided they've got to retire suddenly, or, they've been told they're effectively going to have to retire suddenly, and, that can be stressful. Anyway, if there's nothing else on that item, shall we move on?
Chair, just before we finish, so you may have noticed from the front of the administration paper, we did mention to give you a brief update, and it's a verbal one, on the latest consultation. So that is taking place. It came out on the 15th of May, 2025 by the Ministry, and it's called the Access and Fairness Consultation. And the fund is going to be giving a response to this in the next couple of weeks. But if I'll just summarise briefly the sorts of areas that it's covering, but it's something whereby new regulations are unlikely to come into effect until probably next year at some point. But many of them are areas where the regulations have fallen behind those of other pension schemes, and it's just bringing the LGPS up to date with a number of areas. The sort of areas it's covering is survivor benefits and death grants. The government are looking at the gender pension gap. They are looking at the need for gender pension gap reporting by employers and the fund. They're looking at gathering more information on opt-outs from the fund, so they can gather and understand why people are opting out. There were some new regulations coming in about forfeiture, about when someone's pension can actually be drawn back from them in relation to any criminal activity that takes place and the timings of that taking place. There's quite a lot of changes in relation to McLeod. As I mentioned, the regulations are not currently in place for us to deal with McLeod for certain categories of members. Some work to be done on the abolition of the lifetime allowance, because that has now been removed, and there's a lot of reference to that in regulations, and a number of other little changes which need to be done in order to update the regulations. We will provide a full report to the board once we know exactly which of these will be going forward. Some of them have an implication on workload, particularly those dealing with survivor benefits, because we may have to look back over quite a number of years and recalculate benefits, and that will be a large amount of work for the team to undertake on top of business as usual. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I guess whilst we see people have opted out, we don't always necessarily know why.
That's correct, yeah.
And just on this whole item, I meant to mention when we were discussing the extension on the cloud in an otherwise quite good committee discussion. I must admit, for me, that item had the tone of traffic lights outside the town hall debate sort of thing. But perhaps I should keep that view to myself.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are we now able to move on? We're going to do governance. Who's leading on this?
This is a multi-party, we're going to do a bit of a relay. So I'm starting off the first item, which is around the government's response to the Fit for the Future consultation. Members will recall that we had a series of workshops locally to determine our response to the Fit for the Future consultation. And now on the 29th of May, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government issued their response to the consultation and set out their next steps to bring this all into legislation. So without going into the full detail of everything, I've summarised in Appendix A to this report the original 18 proposals that were consulted upon, the government's response to the consultation, and the vast majority of which are implemented as consulted upon, but the ones that aren't are set out in the appendix. And then in the final column of the appendix, I've set out where I believe at the moment the Berkshire Pension Fund is in relation to existing and future requirements for compliance with those changes. So the pension schemes bill is laid before Parliament at the moment, and that will implement the changes to regulations, legislation, etc. As of this morning, the pensions bill is now sat with the Public Bill Committee for scrutiny, which is likely to happen in September now, and there's a report back to the House of Commons by the 23rd of October. Then it will go to the House of Lords through their readings and review, and royal assent probably between March and June 2026. So we have quite a substantial time to an extent before this becomes regulatory and legislative. But there are various actions that we can undertake in the meantime to ensure preparedness. I'm not going to go through the report in any great detail, but I'm very happy to take questions should anybody have anything on the detail that's provided in the appendix.
Thanks, Jo. It's probably sensible we do each item and pick it up, and then the others. Otherwise, by the time we get to the end, we'll have lost track. So, questions on the section Jo's just introduced? Anyone got anything? Nikki.
Thanks, Jo. And the report is very clear, very easy to read, and it's the table layout I found really easy and flowed really, really nicely in the fact when you put like no further action or action required or minimal action required. So my only question, with all hats on, is whether you have the resource required for the action required. Will you kind of prioritise these, almost picking those up and putting them into a project plan in itself, where you can then identify where you might have gaps in resources, or and particularly plotting timescales if, depending on, some bits, I'm looking at some adopted by September 26, depending what the dates are, would that help to lay it out in that way? And I'm sure the answer to that will be yes, but just a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Yes, this is a very, very high level project plan at the moment. It's not a project plan at all. It's identifying where actions may or may not be required to enable us to focus. So there is some work that needs to be done on the pooling, but that's primarily being driven by LPPI. There is a decision that will need to come in principle to the September 25 Pension Fund Committee meeting, but that will set out exactly what's going there. Local investment will be subsumed within our work that we're already planning to do on our strategic asset allocation. So that's part of that project plan. And the governance side, again, until we know specifically what more is required and what guidance is being sought from the Scheme Advisory Board, etc., we kind of know what we've got to do. We're not quite sure exactly what it is that we've got to do, but we can make some very good stabs. We already have some plans in place on the action plans or the work plans for the board and the committee for the various policies. So we're getting there very clearly. At this stage, I'm not desperately concerned that we won't have the resource to deal with it because it's already factored into our work plan. The governance side, what I'm looking to do is move Philip to an extent into more of a governance role. Now we have the fully manager level to an extent of the administration side to give Philip broader exposure to the governance area of the fund, but also to provide backup to myself should that proverbial bus hit to an extent. So we haven't got a detailed action plan. We have the identification of where actions are required. We've got the work plan that's already covering a lot of those things, and we're building up more detailed work plans as they come through. But thank you very much for your question.
Thanks, Jo. Just on the cover note you've written, in 13 it talks about government has removed the requirement that all pension fund committees appoint an independent pensions expert as a voting member of the committee, now requiring essentially what we already have. We've not had voting members of the committee they've been present, which is obviously helpful and enables the job to be done, but
No, so we've never had the Berkshire Pension Fund Committee is the voting members are only those elected members of RBWM as administering authority. Government previously consulted on whether there should be voting membership for independent people who aren't that. Something that was also included in the good governance project on which this recommendations are based was that there should be representation on committees or for other employers, scheme member representation, and potentially independent people. Those weren't brought in detail to this consultation, but I think it is something that in my mind, I think the governance of the pension fund needs to be reviewed. We've already spent a great deal of time looking at the terms of reference for the pension board, but there is something that we might want to consider in terms of the Berkshire pension fund is bigger than RBWM. There are 6 unitaries and there are 300 other employers in there. Is it right? And it's not a question for debate today, it's a question that's in my head, and I'm proposing and talking to Ian as Section 151 officer at the moment and Elaine as monitoring officer, is whether the governance arrangements for the pension fund as a whole are actually still right. Should we potentially combine the panel, which is advisory members from the other 5 unitaries and the committee, into a decision-making body where others get a say on the voting decisions? Should there be scheme member representation on the board? Otherwise, scheme members are represented on the board, sorry. They are already on the board, but should they be represented on the committee? This body here as a board is not a decision-making body. So, but should there be the opportunity for scheme members to have input into the decisions that are made? Berkshire is one of there aren't very many pension fund committees of the 86 that don't have scheme member representation on their committee. We don't even have a non-voting scheme member rep on our committee. Is there a question? Is that something that we should be looking at? So it's bigger than just saying independent advisors, non-voting, voting. It's whether we should have a consideration of the wider scale. So this is out with the scale of this, the scope of this consultation, but it is something that's been in my head for quite some time as to whether we've actually got appropriate representation on the committee. But in terms of what we've got in here, we have 2 independent advisors. We have an independent investment advisor and we supposedly have an independent governance and strategy advisor. To my mind at the moment, both of our advisors provide investment advice and neither of them provide governance and strategy advice. So when we come to re-specify the contracts for the advisors, which will be in September 26th, is a new appointment. So June, spring, summer 2026, we'll be specifying our requirements. There should be greater guidance as to what the expectation of an independent advisor from Fit for the Future will be that we can build into our specification. Does that make sense? Sorry, I've answered several questions without actually answering the question you asked, I think.
I think that does broadly make sense. I mean, and just to sort of add, when the previous governance review was done that I think I drew your attention to recently, I know the then reviewer was rather concerned that he felt the independent advisors had rather too much influence and with nominally voting members of the then investment working group that was sort of meeting somewhat behind closed doors, somewhat without any sense of public scrutiny, and that was one of the big criticisms in that report, that the structure we now have sought to address. And whilst I take your point that whilst I attend the committee as a member representative, should the well,
you attend the committee as the chair of the board.
No, sorry, I attend the committee being as a member, but I'm doing it as chair of the board, and of course the chair of the board has, prior to me having that role, generally been an employer representative, and as I understand it, not always been able to attend sort of thing. So that would obviously be quite a significant change and quite a challenge too. I mean, bearing in mind the challenges we have of recruiting for member representatives set into the board on occasion, that's sort of an issue that would need to be worked through and thought through quite carefully. Shall we move on to the ones for recommendation to committee? Is that where we want to go next?
Thank you. Yes, so item 8BA, we're picking up on page 75 of your packs. So to provide some context, first of all, abatement in itself is a technical term concerning the reduction or suspension of a local government pension, where a pensioner has entered further local government employment. Essentially, if the annual salary in the second local government employment plus the value of the annual pension in payment exceed the annual pension at the initial retirement, the pension may be reduced in part or in full. That's for the duration of the re-entry into local government employment. So until the 31st of March 1998, abatement of an annual pension was mandatory. However, in the period 1st of April 1998 to the 31st of March 2014, abatement was at the discretion of the administering authority. Then following the introduction of the new scheme regulations, the care scheme from the 1st of April 2014, abatement ceased to be relevant for service after this date. So therefore, accordingly, a scheme member who only has LGPS membership from the 1st of April 2014 cannot be subject to abatement. It's important to note that abatement can only apply where an employee is eligible to join the LGPS. For example, those over the age of 75, those employed via an agency or a consultancy basis would not have access to the LGPS and would therefore not be subject to abatement. The criteria for abatement is based therefore solely on eligibility. And so an employee who does not have access to the LGPS would be subject to abatement, even in circumstances where they have chosen to opt out. Also important to note is that a pension that is in payment to a surviving partner of a former scheme member cannot be abated should the surviving partner enter local government employment and be eligible for the LGPS. It's therefore as required by LGPS regulations that administering authorities must produce, publish and keep under review an abatement policy. For several years, the policy of this pension fund has been not to abate, and the report in front of you sets out there are no changes made therefore to the existing policy, and essentially recommends, unless there are significant changes to LGPS regulations in the meantime, there are to be no changes to the policy for the next 3 years, beginning from the policy's adoption in September, the upcoming September, following the next meeting of the Pension Fund Committee. Any questions?
Thanks, Phil. This is an unchanged policy, and I didn't see any reason why we need to be making changes to it at this stage, so I suggest we move on.
Sorry,
somebody, is it? Oh, Jeff, sorry,
yeah. Can I just ask, this is such a sensible policy? Could we not knock it on for 6 years rather than 3? It seems to me logical not to have to keep on bringing it back. I know it's every 3 years and not every year, but surely, you know, just forever or till further notice. Is there not an option for that?
I completely understand what you're saying, Jeff. But I think in terms of good governance, I think a 3-year cycle where we do everything generally on a 3-year cycle in terms of triennial valuation, there's going to be a requirement for a triennial governance review. I think it's important that we keep the policy under review at least every 3 years, even if it is literally a report that comes in and says, we've looked at it, there's no change, move on. Just from a good governance perspective, obviously, if there are changes to regulations or legislation, etc., we'll bring it forward more quickly, but then we'll restart the 3-year timetable from that date. I understand what you're saying. I just think it's best practice to keep a 3-year cycle for review. Thanks for the suggestion, Jeff.
I think my only comment on that is perhaps we can look at things that are not likely to change or only change slowly and try and get them all on the same time scale, so we can do them all at once, sort of thing, and would be where I'd be in that space, and agreeing with you that if there's a regulation that says these should be periodically reviewed, 3 years seems fair enough, but avoid wasting too much time each time you're doing the review.
I mean, just to add, if I may, that there's 3 policies here. Joe and I, we have looked at sort of work plans of old and the regularity that other policies have been brought to your attention and reviewed. We have made some time frames longer, rather than bringing, there were several that were annual. We've moved those out to every 2, 3, 4 years even.
Code of conduct.
So that's me again. So picking up here on page 81. So what is essentially a pension board code of conduct? It outlines the expected ethical behaviours and standards for members of the pension board. It covers areas like conflicts of interest, confidentiality, and commitment to training and attendance. The code is there to ensure that pension board operates with integrity, transparency and accountability, as well as encouraging best practices, pension scheme management and administration. To ensure compliance with the pension regulator's new general code of practice, officers will in due course review the code of conduct with particular focus on publishing a conflict of interest policy, with particular focus on conflicts that arise because of the administering authority managing its pension fund in a local authority environment. This report therefore recommends that the pension board notes the report and recommends the policy to the pension fund committee for adoption again from September after the next meeting of the pension fund committee.
Thanks, Phil. Queries, comments on this? I briefly observed the things that we have copies of or have access to, I believe, are all on the website. Those listed on page 85. So we do have that access. And I know in the several years I've been chairing this board, at least one occasion I've participated in a review of this. So assuming this is not a changed document from whatever we last had, I'm content and with it. The only point I sort of put a comment on in mind of that nature is on page 86 and the 4th dotted bullet point, respect the principle of collective decision making and statutory responsibility. And once the board has made a decision, members should support that decision. I think that respect might be a better word than support, because it's unusual for the board to be divided on an issue. But if somebody has voted against an issue, I think that they, to say they've then got to say they support the issue they've voted against is a bit rich, but they should not present the issue in another format other than the board supported whatever the issue was, sort of thing, and respect the issue. They may, for whatever reasons they had, continue to think it was the wrong decision of the board, but that's I don't recall such circumstances actually having ever truly existed on anything of huge significance. That's just one comment I'd make on it. Shall we move on to breaches of the law?
Of course. So last policy for the time being. This one starts on page 95 of your packs. Breaches of the law. Clearly, identification of, management and reporting of is important. Again, a requirement of the pensions regulator. Failure to report such material breaches is deemed a civil offence and can result in civil penalties. At the same time, in addition to identifying, rectifying and where necessary reporting a particular breach, it's opportunity to learn from mistakes, review and improve processes in the areas in which a breach has occurred, to do utmost best to avoid a reoccurrence. Therefore, all employees involved in the administration and management of the pension fund are expected and indeed required to take a proactive approach to such identification, management and reporting of all breaches that have occurred or likely to occur. The pension fund, on behalf of the council, as the scheme manager for the pension fund, maintains a log of all breaches or suspected breaches of the law as applicable to management and administration, and plays a significant contributing factor to the pension fund being managed effectively. Where a breach or suspected breach has occurred, it should be identified and recorded as defined under the pension law section 70 of the Pension Act 2004 or Pension Regulators Code of Practice. A breach of the law is an act of breaking or failing to observe a law, agreement or code of conduct, covering several areas in LGPS management and administration. For example, to do anything required under underwriting legislation, applicable statutory guidance or codes of practices, failure to maintain accurate records, to act fraudulently, or an employer failing to pay over their member and employer contributions in a timely fashion, to pay member benefits accurately, again, in a timely manner, or the issue of annual benefit statements. So a lot there of what Martin touched on in his administration report. We recommend that the breaches of the law policy is recommended by the pension board for publication again in September after the meeting of the pension fund committee.
Thanks, Phil. Comments, questions, queries on this? The key paragraph is probably 3, to note that it's a section 151 officer who's being designated within RBWM as the person who will actually report these things, though I tend to suppose should, in what feels like the unlikely event of a board member becoming the first person to notice a breach of the law or a possible breach of the law, I suspect those will be raised with some of the officers who are present to company, whichever seems appropriate to move up the chain. As you know, whilst I did happen to bump into him this morning outside the, I don't normally have cause to see him that often, and those of you who aren't in Maidenhead very often, probably even less so. Any other comments? I've got one minor one myself. The minor one myself is I question whether the 3rd, 4th and 5th paragraphs under introduction, which are largely now 10-year plus old history, are usefully left in policies, and I'll leave that thought with you to decide what to do in September or not, or could be shortened. In the introduction section, the background is sort of becoming quite historical, and I sort of tend to think if it's very recent history, why we're doing this now, that makes sense. When it becomes 10 years old, this is the way we do stuff, sort of thing. You know, do we really need to keep it in policy forever? Is where I would come from, that's the only sort of point. Otherwise, I suggest we move on to knowledge and understanding assessment outcomes, which we need to carefully discuss. I've missed something. I beg your pardon. Thanks, Joe.
So thank you, Chair. This is just a very quick update on the responsible investment policy. My original intention was to bring the draft policy here to this meeting for onward recommendation to the Pension Fund Committee in September. However, due to the very detailed and very useful discussions that we had in the 2 meetings of the Task and Finish group that we held so far, we didn't actually get to the final stage of drafting a policy. So I'm in the process of scheduling a third responsible investment task and finish group meeting either next week or the subsequent week, depending on the dates that members are available, to finalise the responsible investment policy for the pension fund, with a view to still taking it to the 15th of September pension fund committee. However, that will, if the board want to have scrutiny of it, and I think the board should have scrutiny of it, we would probably need to schedule a further single item, very short, hopefully, pension board meeting in the last week of August, appreciating it is holiday season and it's August and we don't have formal meetings in August, but I can't do it any other way, unfortunately. So I will circulate after this meeting a request for a suitable day. I'm thinking either the 27th or the 28th of August. During the day, I know that certain members of the board are on leave in that period, but unfortunately, needs must. So what I will do, I've circulated the draft of the proposed draft of the updated policy to members of the task and finish group for their comment. As soon as I've had that comment back, I will circulate the policy to the board members for your scrutiny and review. But essentially, the responsible investment policy is being reworded to make it more readable in terms of plain English. Not proposing any changes to the priorities that we already have in the policy in terms of climate change, pollution, biodiversity, affordable housing, local investment and corporate governance, but adding in a few statements of reliance on LPPI as the investment pool for us complying with their policies and implementing exclusions that way, stating that we prefer engagement with the companies rather than divestment to support improvement, and not including any specific reference in the policy to the Israel-Gaza campaign, but making a general statement that we will consider petitions, lobbying, requests for disinvestment in line with the two tests of supporting non-financial decisions, that there's no material financial detriment to the fund in making that decision, and that the majority of scheme members would be in agreement to it. So progress is being made on the RI policy. Unfortunately, it's not as fast as I like, but we're getting into much more detailed discussion, and it's actually been very, very helpful. So I think the policy that comes out of that discussion will be much more robust. So really for members to note that the progress is being made, to note that I will be circulating some dates, and hopefully we can get a quorate board meeting to finalise the policy for its onward recommendation from the board to the Pension Fund Committee on the 15th of September. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. The dates that Joe circulated of the next meeting of the task and finish group, I think she circulated about 4 dates. I know I can only just about do one of them, so I may sort of say, once the date is that set, if any other board member can do that meeting, at least, you know, could they attend in my place if that's not the one I can just about do. I'm assuming in terms of having a meeting of the board, we'll do that entirely online, because whilst I'm always happy to come to Maidenhead, I wasn't planning to come to Maidenhead for a brief one-item meeting. I think we might also explore, if several people are going to be on holiday at the time we end up having that meeting, whether we can also receive any comments by correspondence ahead of the meeting. So everybody has had an opportunity to contribute to this area. It is a sort of well, it's been quite fashionable in recent years to have and develop policies in this area, and we're effectively giving our policy its first review, and that's taken time and properly taken time to do. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. And I presume Joe and I will liaise on what days to circulate, so the chair can be there, sort of thing, and then we'll find a date that we need to just make sure we can at least be quorate. Okay, I think we can now move on to knowledge and understanding. Thank you.
So firstly, thank you to all board members who completed the knowledge and understanding assessment. It's really helpful, and the results are summarised on page 109 of your pack. So it's pleasing to see that the boards, other than officers, let's just say, you'd expect us to know what we're trying to do. So you'd hope that we would have the highest scores, and in most instances we did, so that's very good. The board's knowledge level of understanding of the law and the rules of the scheme is good. There's no areas that have jumped out on this question as fundamentally requiring a beating of knowledge into the board members, shall we say. But we're using this opportunity to identify areas where it may be better to focus our knowledge and understanding development. And we're still working on that. There is a lot of areas that we'll be covering as part of our work plan over the next 12 months in terms of the valuation, the funding strategy statement coming around from that, strategic asset allocation and the investment strategy, looking at the administration strategy, the communication strategy, the business plan and budget. So a lot of these areas will be covered again over the next 12 months. The fit for the future requirements, the consultation is requiring now that the existing regulatory requirement for board members to have levels of knowledge and understanding will be extended, to committee members. And there's a statement in the response that it will be for a requirement on individuals, not for the committee as a whole. So I'm assuming that there will be a requirement that all committee members have a level of knowledge and understanding, and we will be able to target development programmes specific or generic to the committee and the board as a whole, but also target some specific development activities to individual members. The government is going to work with the Scheme Advisory Board to work out and update the knowledge framework and suggest areas, but at the moment, thank you everybody for taking part in this survey. Be reassured that your levels of knowledge and understanding are not as bad as perhaps you might have thought, and actually they are very good in comparison with some of the other national results that I've seen. So thank you very much, but just be prepared for lots of more knowledge and understanding development opportunities coming forward in the next 12 to 18 months. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Clearly, just my comments on the information here, clearly how you present, particularly the advisory panel information, that committee needs careful thought if you haven't got a fuller house than you've got at the moment, and it might be best to combine it with the committee or something like that if you haven't got a fuller picture. Given that moment, I think you only got two, but then only two or sometimes three people are turning up. I wanted to just make the observation on this. There was a mixture of our own self-assessment of our confidence sort of thing. So, inevitably that will be done against slightly different scales, but hey ho, that's where it is, and hopefully, that's given us a picture. And I think if I read this right, some of the questions were actually testing knowledge, and it's important to note that the what's presented to us reports whether we got a correct or wrong answer, and it not whether the statement which then says correct or whether that is in itself is correct or wrong. Indeed, many of the statements that we by and large got correct were in fact not a correct statement. Was my sort of reading of the position. Just for the record, I was pleased to see that my own knowledge and assessment was at least on a par, if not a little better than the board average. So I felt I could continue to be chair. Other questions? Thank you. Sorry, you want me to get us on to the next item? Governance? No, we must be on to risk.
Yeah, thank you. Because of the timing of this meeting and the fact that we had a meeting in March, we didn't have a meeting in April, and we've had a meeting in July. There was a pension fund committee meeting in June that had an update to the risk register. So we're kind of a little bit out of sync. My intention is that the risk register is reviewed in detail by the pension board and then recommended changes, etc., to the committee at their subsequent meeting. Unfortunately, due to the timing of this meeting, we've got it kind of a little bit the wrong way round. So I've referred in the committee, in the board paper, to the report that went to the committee in June that sets out the detailed review that was undertaken, but I've also summarised proposal to reduce 3 risk scores, 2 of which were reported to committee and 1 that's new. So given on page 135, reducing the risk score of pension of risk 12 increases to employer contributions, given the fact that the funding level, early indications are the funding level is similar. Changes to the assumptions will mean that the primary rate, which is a percentage of payroll for most of the large employers, will be reducing, but the secondary rate of contribution, the lump sum deficit recovery, will be increasing. On average, the total cash value of contributions payable by our major employers will remain similar to what it was in last year. So the risk of significant increases to employer contributions has been reduced. So I've downgraded that risk from an amber risk to a green risk. Following the report that you've had already on the McLeod remedy, I've reduced slightly the risk of the McLeod failure. It's still red, but it's gone from 44 to 33. And as we progress with the McLeod project, as Martin's outlined previously, that risk will continue to reduce. And the unpreparedness for the compliance with the outcomes of the Fit for the Future, given the agenda item that we spoke about earlier, I've reduced that from an amber risk to a green risk. But on further review, I suggest probably that this pensions risk 48 will be eliminated to an extent and replaced by potential either an action plan or another risk or number of risks on those specific items that need to be completed. So what I'm proposing going forward is that for the September 25 Pension Fund Committee meeting, I present a report that says the board will be considering a full review of the risk register at its October meeting. And from October, the board will see the detailed review of the risk register and then recommend the changes to the risk register to the subsequent Pension Fund Committee meeting. So effectively not present a detailed risk report to the September Pension Fund Committee meeting, but hold off for a quarter to an extent to get it back into the proper cycle of the board doing the in-depth review and recommending those changes to the committee. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments that the board may have.
I mean, in essence, as I've understood, the intention is we do the review at our meetings and then either whatever was presented to us, if we agreed it or whatever we changed it to, having had the discussion, would then get presented to the committee for formal adoption is where we're heading to. We've obviously had the anomaly of this cycle. I was obviously in the room for the discussion of the first two. I'd make the observation that I mean, it's good news that from the early indications of the actuary, we've finally got to a stability of contributions, because I'm unfortunately been around long enough to know when we sort of started at the beginning of the last decade on the well, then deficit recovery period over 30 years that got down to 18, and at the last actuarial evaluation was reduced to 17. Did I see we're taking another year out in this one, or proposing to?
3 years out, so it goes over 30.
Yeah, the 3 years that we've presumably lost in the intervening, and then I presume that's what the 3 years is. Yeah. In my mind, we should have been going down from 17 to 14 at this time, but if we're going down to 13, we've taken an extra year out, sort of thing, and not needing an increase in contributions. If it's able to take 3 years out in addition to the 3 that would have gone anyway, that would be remarkably good. And yes, I think the others are right. My observation is that because of changes that may occur in LPPI, we may end up with a bunch of risks associated with that, which I assume what Joe is hinting at.
I'm not anticipating there being additional risks in terms of LPPI, but I'm thinking in terms of compliance with regulations, in terms of local investment strategy and the governance reviews and other areas coming out. So I'm not anticipating there be any increase in risk in terms of LPPI relationship.
Okay, I understand that issue. In the past, we chose not to be a shareholder. In the possibility we did become a shareholder, we would at least need to consider what new risks, if any, that arose.
And that will be discussed in principle at the September Pension Fund Committee meeting, but the final operational decision will not be made until March 26.
Other questions, comments on the risk report? Jeff shaking his head, Julian's shaking his head. So I think we're happy with that. So this this risk register in this format won't actually see its full at September. We'll see this updated for a discussion in October. Just at some stage, do we do this by way of workshop rather than at committee? I just throw that out. I'm not suggesting we do it this year, but at some stage it feels like it lends itself to that sort of approach.
We did hold a risk management workshop shortly after I joined, actually. I can't remember when it was, to look at the risk management policy. We've never quite considered the requirement to have a risk register workshop, but that's an option. I think in terms of some of the specific projects, specifically in terms of the climate risks, we are looking at the Task and Finish group having a discussion about those risks as part of that workshop. But I think in general, I think the risks that we have on our risk register are not uncommon against other LGPS funds. So I don't think we've got anything that's too out there to an extent. Potentially on some of the bigger projects, when there are specific new areas coming through, it may be worth having a workshop or discussions, but at the moment, I don't think there's anything suggesting that we should sit down and go through all 48 risks on a line-by-line basis to take up your valuable time. I'm happy to take up my valuable time doing it, but I don't think there's any need to do that for board members or committee members.
I'm happy with that at the current time, Joe, and I also recognise there's a massive workload to do with things we've already touched on the agenda at the moment. So we probably need that extra meeting, but I think at some point, at some stage in the future, we probably do need to find ways of just saying, probably in slightly less formal circumstances, how, are we happy with what we've got, or could we do this differently? And but that's not now.
I would say though to members of the board, if you are, once you've read through the risk register, if you think there is anything that is missing, anything that is on there that shouldn't be, or you've got any changes outside of this meeting, please do contact me. I'm very happy to talk through or take suggestions as to changes to the risk register. And then we can bring them back to the board more formally at the next meeting for wider adoption or consideration if there is any issues. But don't wait until we get to the next board meeting to come up with any comments, please. I'm very happy to take them in the meantime, because obviously you don't think about anything else other than pension fund risk registers when you're walking around doing your day job, because that's my job. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So shall we move on to the work plan?
Thank you. Sorry for the busyness of this report. I've tried to highlight in red changes from the previous version that was on the pension, presented to the pension board. Some things are moving into later meetings, primarily just because there are not enough hours in the day to do everything that we hope we'd like to do. We like to set ourselves some challenging targets, but sometimes we fail. But we're putting ourselves into the plan, and we're making sure that we're keeping everything going forward. October meeting already looks like a busy meeting, as well as doing the risk register. We've got administration strategies, budget review, draft annual report and accounts, funding strategy statement, communication strategy, blah, blah, blah. Plus, again, acknowledging that everybody is really busy, there are things that we need to do in terms of informal meetings. So please bear with us as we keep this going, but hopefully at least you'll know what you're planning to be looking at over the next couple of meetings when you're in here.
But thanks, Joe. And some of those things in October pretty much have to hit that meeting because they're sort of part of the infrastructure that leads into the evaluation cycle in the early part of next year. So I do appreciate those are going to, well, the next 6 months is the traditional busy 6-month period every 3 years that goes with that. And well, we've already been alluding to it in the meeting tonight, but looks like it's a straightforward, or more straightforward than some have been valuations. Any comments, questions on that? Not seeing anything. So,
Arthur, did you have anything? You moved your lips, but you were still on mute, sorry.
Is there anything else we need to pick up before we go into part 2? Nobody's indicating that. So can we pass the resolution as under section 184 of the Government Act 72, the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting whilst discussions takes on the grounds that may involve likely or possible disclosure of exempt information as described in those sections as written? We're content with that. Thank you for nodding to that. So we'll swap over and see everyone else in a moment or two, but part 2 is quite short today.